I used to really think that I could change the world, and I look back, 3, 4 years ago, and there was a sense of really youthful optimism and idealism. If I work as part of this process, I'm going to help make things better for my community and by extension, my society even in the long term. And I really hate to say it, but I don't know how much I can believe that anymore. Um, it seems like in the past few years there's just been one setback after another. And frankly, after keeping up with current events so long, and after working, tirelessly on so many campaign efforts, including my own, I don't know if I have any more energy for working for change that nobody else seems to want. And I know it sounds depressing. It is depressing. I look back and I think, if only I had that same optimistic spirit that I did a few years ago. I don't know what happened. I don't know if it's me. I don't know if it's the world. You know, I feel really, really old saying that right now. I do. I mean, I'm not that old, I promise, although I think the camera is pretty kind to me, really, probably because it's such, low resolution. But, if you look closely in person, you can see these, wrinkles around these crow's feet and, these lines around my mouth. And, oh my God, don't even get me started about my forehead. But, regardless of that, I'm not that old. And it's I'm too young to be feeling this way. I'm too young to feel like, all of my optimism about, bringing positive change into the world is gone. But, that's kind of what I feel like right now. Waking up every morning, reading a different New York Times article about, um, how Christine O'Donnell doesn't believe in the separation of church and state, and how Joe Miller wants to repeal the Department of Education, and to see all these people rallying behind them, waving American flags, not knowing a thing about what they're talking about. It's disgusting, and it's pathetic, and it's a tragedy beyond words. And, ultimately, the only solution behind that I can really see is to push a better, broader, more well-rounded education system that can take into account several different factors. I've, talked about such an education system briefly before. In the only way that we're going to bring long-term constructive change to the country is to change the way um, that people come to understand the nation we live in, and that change is going to be through the education system. Unfortunately, one can't change the education system without dealing in some way with legislation, and it's all a revolving cycle. And I don't know if it's a revolving cycle that I have very much more patience for. I'm going to vote, and I have voted, I should say, by absentee ballot. And, I'm not saying that voting doesn't make a difference, because it does. But it doesn't make the kind of difference that we need. I don't know what does. I'm at a loss. I'm at a loss. Um, I wish that I had a more positive opinion to spout out there, but I don't. But I think the issue at the core of everything is, the issue of understanding. I think that if understanding of the issues, and by understanding I don't mean talking points, I mean, full, complete, clear understanding of the factors behind the issues, understanding of the parties involved, understanding the facts. Um, I believe that the problem that we face with anti-intellectualism in this country would be, essentially a non-issue, because we'd all be on a more level intellectual playing field. Um, I'll always remember there was one time a few months ago that I went out with some friends to a restaurant, and I was and they were talking about gang violence, which is a very serious issue, and making jokes about it. And the jokes were along the line of, I mean, obviously they were along racial lines, and then that led to a more, I say, in depth with like a very tangible eye roll here. But it led to a discussion about gang violence where the conclusion was kind of reached. Well, I mean, it makes sense if ever since the economy's gone down, gang violence would go up. Um, Not that this was based on any actual research or study, or I don't know where it came from, but it was put out there, and then everybody at the table started to believe it. Um, and I was probably out of line and saying something like, well, I mean, there are a lot of deep-seated societal factors that tie into, why gangs exist in the first place. There are a lot of racial factors, a lot of factors, pertaining to the income inequality that we face here, a lot of educational factors, particularly within, urban school districts. And I've said it before, and I'll say it again. As long as schools are funded by property taxes, we're never going to see an improvement in inner city schools. But that's beyond the point. Um, and so I'm talking about, sociology and, sort of social political history. And, one of these people turns to me and says, I don't care about your fancy college words. And I think at that point I left the table. Um, because I don't think that words can express the frustration behind that. And perhaps, I was more frustrated at the acceptance of this as a valid response. Um, I don't care about your fancy college words. Excuse me? Um, Unfortunately, my fancy, even with my fancy college vocabulary, I was at a loss for words at that point, and just, sort of sulked away, depressed about society. But that's the kind of thing that I see more and more often. Even when I go into work and I try to explain, policy and procedure to, customers, they don't get it. They don't care. They and they think that they know what's right, just because they're alive, and everyone's entitled to their opinion, right? Um, that's a phrase that we've seen thrown around a lot. Everyone's entitled to their opinion. That's what we've been hearing in class. Every day since we've entered kindergarten, right? Everybody's entitled to their opinion. Honestly, I don't know if they are. I don't know. I'm going to be the first person to stand up and support equality, and I'm going to be the first person to stand up and support, freedom of speech and limited government intervention in these freedoms. Call me a libertarian, if you will. But does everybody's opinion have the same weight? No, someone's texting me. Oh, there's no rehearsal tonight. I'm learning how to tap dance. Anyway, I don't know. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if everyone's opinion does play the same weight. It does have the same weight. Because, we see... Does my opinion, as a politically involved, newspaper reading, college-educated individual, does that hold the same weight as somebody who's, for all practical purposes, illiterate and has no understanding of the world that surrounds them? In our current system, yeah, it does. But should it be like that? I don't know. Again, arrogance, elitism. I'm sorry. I'm popular tonight. Um, it's Becky. Becky's fabulous. And she's coming over shortly, I suppose. Yeah, there we go. That's not very professional of me, but then, this whole setup isn't very professional, so whatever. I didn't even bother to clean today. It's like, look at all that shit. Jesus Christ. I need to hire a maid. Um, if you know anyone who's interested, send them to me, because I don't have time for it. I don't have time for cleaning. I'm not making very good headway with this whole elitism thing, am I? Anyway, it's a really interesting issue to ponder. I don't think it's an issue that we can do anything about, unfortunately. I don't. Because, you know, our country is based around the idea that all individuals are created equal. I believe that from the bottom of my heart. We're all created equal. And, inherently, in terms of human rights, we are all equal. But in terms of the ability to make intelligent decisions about the future and about the direction of our nation, we're not. And, that's a loaded statement. But seeing how things have been going in the past few years, I'm offended that 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 these people with no understanding of the political system, with no understanding of the separation of church and state, have so much power in the process that affects my life and the process that affects the lives of everybody living within the jurisdiction of this country. And I don't know how that's going to change, but I don't know. Anyway, with tomorrow being election day, I encourage you all to be at the polls early and participate in the political process and, vote for somebody who's not an idiot. Have a nice night.